SITREP World Briefing for May 19, 2026. U.S. President Donald Trump said he halted a military attack on Iran that had been planned for Tuesday, arguing that negotiations over Tehran's nuclear program had opened a possible path away from immediate escalation. Trump said there was a very good chance of reaching an agreement and described the talks as serious. The decision followed several days of heightened regional tension, with Washington weighing military action while Iran remained at the center of a wider Middle East crisis. Trump also said he pulled back at the request of Gulf Arab leaders, specifically naming Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, whose governments have sought to contain a conflict that could quickly spread across the region. By pausing the strike, Washington signaled that it was still balancing coercive pressure with diplomacy in dealing with Iran's nuclear file and the risk of a broader regional war. The pause does not amount to a settlement, and Trump's language made clear that military options have not been abandoned. Any agreement to limit Iran's nuclear activities would need to address verification, sanctions pressure, and the credibility of future enforcement, all of which have undermined previous diplomatic efforts. Russia and Belarus began joint nuclear exercises on Monday in Belarus, opening drills that Moscow said would run from May 19 to May 21. Russia's defense ministry said the broader exercise would involve more than 65,000 troops and 7,800 pieces of equipment, while Belarusian territory again served as a platform for operations closely watched by Ukraine and NATO. Kyiv cast the drills as more than political theater, warning that Moscow could be preparing a new offensive from Belarusian territory either against Ukraine or in a move intended to intimidate NATO's eastern flank. That warning matters because Belarus borders Ukraine, Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia, making it a critical corridor between Russian forces and alliance territory. For Belarus, the exercises reinforce Lukashenko's role as Moscow's closest military partner in Europe. For Russia, nuclear drills remain a tool for signaling resolve, raising uncertainty, and pressuring opponents without crossing into actual nuclear use. By staging the operation over 3 days and tying it to a large troop and equipment deployment, Moscow and Minsk are sending a message aimed simultaneously at Kyiv, neighboring NATO states, and domestic audiences. Israeli strikes in Lebanon have pushed the death toll from the war past 3,000, according to Lebanese officials. Lebanon's health ministry said the toll had reached 3,020, including 211 people aged 18 and under and 116 healthcare workers. The figures show that cross-border hostilities have not been contained by formal ceasefire arrangements. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun said he would do the impossible to end the war with Israel. The conflict has centered on Israel and the Lebanese armed group Hezbollah, but the toll has fallen across Lebanese society, including children and health workers. The persistence of strikes after a ceasefire suggests that the mechanisms meant to reduce violence have failed to impose meaningful restraint on the battlefield. Passing 3,000 deaths gives the war new political weight inside Lebanon and abroad. Hezbollah's confrontation with Israel has long made southern Lebanon one of the most combustible fronts in the region. For Beirut, the immediate challenge is to press for an end to Israeli strikes and to preserve what remains of state capacity as hospitals, public services, and local communities absorb the cumulative damage. Russian President Vladimir Putin arrived in Beijing on Tuesday for talks with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, using a 2-day state visit to underline that Moscow and Beijing remain closely aligned. The visit came only days after a meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Xi in the Chinese capital. Putin's trip was framed as an effort to reinforce bilateral ties after that summit. By appearing in Beijing so soon after Trump's visit, Putin and Xi are signaling that China's relationship with Russia remains a central part of both countries' diplomacy. The timing of the visit is significant because Trump's recent trip to Beijing generated headlines on trade, but did not produce a visible change in Xi's position on Ukraine. That outcome strengthened the importance of Putin's appearance in Beijing, where the Kremlin is seeking to show that its partnership with China remains intact. For Xi, receiving Putin in Beijing also demonstrates that China intends to preserve room for strategic cooperation with Russia while managing its relationship with the United States. China is Russia's most important major power partner, and high-level meetings between Putin and Xi are closely watched for signals on trade, energy, sanctions resilience, and diplomatic support. The immediate purpose of Tuesday's meetings was political theater as well as policy coordination. The broader message was that neither leader wants Washington to define the terms of Eurasian power politics. Putin's presence in the Chinese capital immediately after Trump's visit turned Beijing into the stage for a contest over influence. The Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo worsened on May 19th, as Health Minister Samuel Roger Kamba said the death toll had risen sharply to at least 131, drawn from 513 suspected cases, while the World Health Organization prepared an emergency meeting. Health officials and outside experts also warned that the outbreak appeared to be spreading faster than first thought, with infections reported beyond Congo's borders, including in Uganda. The response has been complicated by uncertainty over the true scale of the outbreak. Jean-Jacques Muyembe, the Congolese scientist who co-discovered Ebola, warned that nobody had a firm grip on the numbers, and WHO officials said the real caseload could be much higher than the hundreds of suspected infections already identified. This outbreak involves the rare Bundibugyo strain, and it is unfolding in parts of eastern Congo where conflict, displacement, and weak health infrastructure make contact tracing, laboratory confirmation, and community outreach much harder. As the toll climbed, international authorities began tightening their response. The WHO moved to convene emergency discussions, and the United States announced stronger precautions after the outbreak was declared an international emergency, including screening air travelers from affected areas and temporarily suspending visa services. A federal jury in California rejected Elon Musk's claims against OpenAI and Chief Executive Sam Altman, finding that Musk had waited too long to bring the case. The verdict followed days of testimony and argument, and it handed a courtroom victory to the company behind ChatGPT and to Altman personally. The decision turned on timing rather than a broader reworking of OpenAI's corporate history. The case drew attention because it involved Musk against OpenAI, a company he helped establish before later breaking with its leadership. Altman has become one of the central executives in the global artificial intelligence race. By ending the case on statute of limitations grounds, the jury left OpenAI's current leadership structure intact and removed a legal threat hanging over a company at the center of debates about AI power, governance, and commercial control in the United States. Sources are available at sitrepbrief.com.